Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Oil markets are spiking again, with Brent crude climbing above $126 a barrel after reports that U.S. President Donald Trump is being briefed on potential short and powerful strikes on Iran, while tensions in the Strait of Hormuz continue to threaten global supply flows. As governments warn of rising costs and renewed energy insecurity, Europe is accelerating efforts to reshape its energy system through new alliances and massive infrastructure investment in Central and Eastern Europe. Now, to help us understand it all, we're now joined by Sławomir Raszewski, Senior Oil and Gas Lecturer, University of London. Good to have you back with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, last time we spoke, these prices keep rising of oil. It's $126 a barrel now. Also, the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, it's costing Europe $500 million, rather euros a day, this conflict in the Middle East. So how much worse can it get?
Well, this is a very complex situation, and indeed, last time when we talked about that, we said that it's evolving, it's very dynamic. So, but what we already understand, looking at the policy response, is that we kind of witnessing Brinkmanship. So on the one hand, we keep hearing that the conflict is ending. On the other hand, we see that there is escalation of the conflict. And it's largely, as some commentators point out, to kind of tame the markets and to, if you like, do not allow infliction of greater sort of impact on the prices of oil. However, on the other hand, we also see a growing mismatch between, the situation on the ground, the physical market, and the futures market. So in other words, the price of oil does not necessarily tell us the whole story. How worse it can get, we don't know. But one thing we keep hearing now from tradespeople is that the people who trade oil is that we probably witnessing situation in which the Strait of Hormuz is probably going to be affected indefinitely. And it's clearly the case when you listen to the White House. The White House is not stepping down, it's not de-escalating, and the other side is also doing precisely that. So we probably have to brace ourselves for a prolonged, protracted crisis. And indeed, as you mentioned in the opening, this is precisely what's happening in terms of the response from the European countries, who are getting themselves ready for a long-haul flight, if you like, and trying to address the energy policy by looking at alternatives.
Mm-hmm. But also, I mean, you mentioned brinkmanship to a level. I mean, back to Ursula von der Leyen saying also the costs have risen. Also, another, I believe, transport commissioner said recently that right now there is no danger of a jet fuel shortage. We still have enough. But nevertheless, I mean, as you've just said, I mean, it seems it could be indefinitely closed. I mean, how exposed is Europe then realistically? I mean, we usually use this time to fill up gas. I mean, that's not happening right now, or not to the levels we need. So how exposed is Europe?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think gas is the biggest concern. You can always, as bad as it may sound, you can always create some form of policy response to, jet fuel supply shortages should they occur. I mean, we can be asked not to fly, for instance, at some point. It's feasible to imagine. But when it comes to gas, this filling the gas is definitely the biggest issue at the moment. So in other words, the EU should now start responding to that. The storage needs to be, we need to start filling up the storage now to be ready for winter. And of course, in the previous winters, we had less of an issue because winters were not as harsh as it were, starting from 2020, where with the invasion of Ukraine, we're kind of blessed with the weather, but we don't know exactly what the weather is going to be in the EU, European countries this winter. So yes, gas is definitely the weakest link.
Mm-hmm. Also, I mean, we've talked in the past about this as well, looking at different hubs. If we're looking at Central and Eastern Europe, where do you see, let's say if we look at the macro effect, certain countries better placed to weather this storm right now? Are there countries, for instance, if we're looking at Poland, I know we talked about Croatia as well, I want to get to 3Cs in a moment, but what's the state of play right now for Central and Eastern Europe? Are we better off than, let's say, Germany or France?
Well, I mean, we are all affected by the crisis one way or the other. It's difficult to say, that let's say, one country is better off than another because, if it's not directly through the oil and gas, we are affected through the commodity prices ultimately. But it's fair to say that those countries which have fairly low demand, they are probably going to be less affected. Those countries which are powerhouses, economic powerhouses, take for instance Germany and its response to Druzhba pipeline halted supplies, this market is going to be definitely affected. And by the way, Poland is likely to be affected because Poland is very closely linked economically to Germany when it comes to exports. But generally speaking, I think the problem we are witnessing is that this grand scheme of things problem when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, Europe is broadly absent from these geopolitical negotiations. These geopolitical negotiations are not taking into account the Europeans, but Europeans are directly affected by them. So this is probably the most worrying issue of all.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, absence in terms of in which regard? Because we've had obviously European officials, leaders making their case very much about the dissatisfaction of all this. But how would they be more present, and in what capacity do you see that?
Well, I mean, partly it's because the conflict now involves the largest players. If you look at the coalition, on the one hand you have US and its main ally in the Middle East, and on the other hand you have kind of disengaged Europeans who are not sure exactly whether they're in or out. And on the other hand you have Iran supported by, well, let's face it, the main two countries to the east, Russia and China. So in this confrontation, Europeans are kind of in the back seat, and therefore they are largely at the receiving end, if you like. So we don't know exactly what is going to happen, how we're going to affect it in Europe, because these decisions, geopolitical decisions, are not being made by European Union. European Union is not a geopolitical actor in its own right. Independent states, sovereign states are. So Europe will have to receive the outcome of these developments, and largely is going to continue to pay for this crisis. As you mentioned, you quoted a number. On average, we are all paying for this crisis and will continue to pay for this crisis.
Mm-hmm. And speaking also of paying something for the future and investing in the future, let's get your sense of also this 3Cs initiative, gathering those 13 leaders in Dubrovnik, Croatia, these last days. There was also U.S. presence, the Energy Secretary. I'm just curious of what you make of those memoranda. Apparently there would be something about pipelines said, LNG. Is this good news for the region? How do you interpret it?
Well, I mean, the 3Cs initiative, which we discussed several years ago on this channel, it's a long overdue. This is something that should have been implemented a long time ago. But, we see that Europeans are kindly responding to crisis rather than trying to build a cohesive common energy policy. So, as I said, it's long overdue. Is it going to help? Yes, it will help. But we are not going to witness instant results of these initiatives, expansion of pipelines into Bosnia and Herzegovina, and building interconnectors, most importantly, further down the line to relieve nations in Central Eastern Europe is going to be very helpful as a long-term strategy. And again, this just tells us that the EU is probably bracing itself for a long whole flight, in a sense, by responding with such a policy, by revitalizing 3Cs initiative. But as I said, this is a long overdue, and we probably will have to wait for the results of this initiative for another few years. And hopefully this initiative will stay on the agenda, because this will add alternatives to supply via LNG. Is it going to be a game changer? I mean, we shall see. At the moment, it's definitely not a game changer because it requires interconnections to be added to the rest of Central and Eastern Europe.
And also, just to conclude, I mean, I said this is something that's been ongoing. It's been criticized for not having enough tangibles, 3Cs initiative. I mean, can those interconnectors, can that energy focus, can that collaboration function without the 3Cs initiative, or is it enhanced because of it? How do you see this in the future, just briefly?
Well, I think the Three Seas initiative is an enhancement, and it will definitely help. Ultimately, there is more policy focus required in the north as well, in the Baltic Sea. Obviously, the Baltic Sea has been a bit vulnerable because of the proximity to the theater of conflict, if you like, broadly speaking, in this part of the world. But overall, I see it as an enhancement rather than sort of a game changer.
Mm-hmm. And then ultimately just conclude everything with the news of oil rising dramatically. Is this another spike, or will it come down? What's your, let's say, midterm assessment just before we end?
I think this spike is we're probably going to witness slightly higher prices should the escalation continue, because people kind of stop believing that the conflict is come to an end. People understand that the conflict is protracted now, so we are no longer hoping for the best. We're probably bracing ourselves for the worst. So things will get worse before they get better.
All right, so giving us the latest on energy, that energy crisis globally there. Thanks so much, Sławomir Raszewski. Thanks for all your insight.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.